The most serene Republic of Venice. So much history, so much culture, and so much power for such a small state. Venice arguably should have been the most unique faction in Medieval to Total War, and yet there's really nothing too special about it. Nothing that truly reflects what Venice was about. This video will attempt to improve it, whilst staying roughly within the limitations of the game and engine, but we can pull from mechanics in the expansions of the game. So if it's in Kingdoms, we can bring that and use that as well. Now I need to make a few points clear from my last video on this series, my Carthage video. A lot of people's suggestions was to just fix the AI or just rebalance the faction. Well, yes, I agree, but that would be a pretty boring video. The goal of the series is to be more creative, to think about interesting methods that can make the faction better and more enjoyable, but improve upon the history at the same time. I've said many times before, history is not a limitation. There's just as much creative potential in history than fantasy, but it is harder to work on. Also, people suggested very out there type of stuff. Those ideas are cool, I enjoyed reading them, but the rules are, if the game cannot do it, we cannot add it. Otherwise, the sky is the limit, and these videos would just go off on wild tangents. So that being said, first of all, we need an understanding of Venice. Venice was a republic, not a monarchy, as shown in game. Venice was also a much smaller state by the starting point. They were a trading empire with strong connections to the east. Goods would come from the east, and as water is faster than land for transportation, would flow right up the Adriatic and spread into Central Europe from there. This trade through Venice is what made them so wealthy. The decline of Venice must also be understood. There's always several factors, but one major one is the discovery of the Americas. Now goods did not have to come from the east, as England, Spain and all of those could now get them for themselves. Trade from east to west slowed, and Venice suffered financially from that, showing the importance that these trade routes should hold for Venice. The Venetian navy was therefore incredibly important and safeguarded these trade routes. Venice does start with a large navy, but there's not really any use for it for financial gain. So how can a faction in Medieval 2 be portrayed as a trading republic? Well, I think a republic can be somewhat portrayed using the HRE system from Medieval 2 Teutonic campaign, where there is no family tree and characters spawn through other means. This would make the faction overall a lot more random, but would still work. Would it be enjoyable? I would say yes, as it is unique and not game breaking. It does lose the family tree, however, a feature that does add entertainment value. However, you could potentially take the papal mechanic and use it for Venice as well. Perhaps the game reviews all the stats of all the characters, then the player picks who the faction leader will be from the top 3 names. Just a revised version of the Pope selection mechanic, but exclusive to Venice, to show the Republic side of the faction. This is the best system the game really has to portray a republic. I don't think Venice could be divided into 4 factions like Rome. I don't think that would work the same way. Now, as for Venice's starting territory, it is inaccurate. However, these inaccuracies make Venice feel more unique and forces you, at least at the start, to play somewhat like Venice would historically. It pushes you and the AI into that style, and certainly pushes for that historical rivalry with the Byzantines. Overall, I think it works, so I won't be changing the starting cities. There's a difference between historically visually and a historical feel. This is inaccurate, but it makes it feel more accurate, like the Roman houses. Okay, but now how to portray the Venetian trading power, how to have it as clearly being the best in this area, but not too overpowered. After hours and hours, and sadly more hours, of thinking, I could only find one real way. The guild system in Medieval 2 is a heavily underrated and underused mechanic. The English have their own guild tree, for example, that allows them to gain access to Sherwood archers. So I think Venice should have the same. I think a series of trading related guilds exclusive to Venice would work here. How to gain these guilds? Well, I think merchants and merchant actions should generate the required points to build them. Nearby rebel pirates, possibly blockading, take points away. Merchants are a cool mechanic that I think, given a bit of work, could be so much more. Most people don't use them though, because they are useless early game, and by the point they do get good and bring in serious money, those types of players usually win by that point. However, if the merchants of Venice were to have another value, a side ticker that allows the construction of guilds, which then provides a serious boost to trade overall, so serious in fact that you would be a fool not to strive for it, then that would force the player to experience and experiment with merchants more. Usually Venice players I see as the roleplay types of players, and this playstyle of working with merchants combined with the New Republic system, I think would really satisfy that community. With all this extra trade, I think then a larger fleet would become the natural choice for the player. If those gilded ports get blockaded, the player would now lose serious money, hence they would then be more tempted to build a larger fleet, play like Venice, to defend those trade routes, as under this system it would be much more worthwhile. So there we have it, my fixes for Venice. Leave a like if you enjoyed or agree overall. This series is still very new, so any feedback is of course welcome. Also, comment down below what title and faction I could cover next. There's a lot of factions that should be so much more in the game, rather than just being a copy and paste of another faction. Subscribe and turn on notifications to get notified of more. But for now, until the next one, tomorrow's video, MELKOR.